It's Friday, September 29th. I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Football Show presented by NerdWallet. Ooh, baby, it's a hell of a day to talk ball. And joining me to do just that is Dan Titus. Dan, appreciate you joining me. I understand, as a complete NFL shut-in, I understand that yesterday there was some rather large news in your, you dabble with us here on the football side, but you're primarily doing fantasy basketball for us. So I understand there was a rather large, perhaps significant piece of news yesterday in the basketball world. So I appreciate you taking time to join us plebes here in the football world.
Plebes. Yeah, it was crazy, man. Damian Lillard's now on the Bucks, and we'll see what happens with Drew Holiday. But it was nice to actually get a feeling of what it's like in your world, because I know that there's this breaking news stuff happens all the times. When you get that chef dealer, it's like all hands on deck, and it's like, oh man, no matter where you are, we got to react to this. So I think that this is probably the most significant news we'll see on the basketball front for some time, but you never know, man. Like I kind of love it. That's the great part about our job. It's like, oh man, we get to react live, and maybe it's an overreaction in some cases, but this is it's a good time, man. This is like the perfect intersection of baseball's winding down because no one cares about that. And it's like fully football and basketball gearing up, man. I love this time. Great time of year.
Hell yeah, man. It might be the last time Dan joins us on this podcast for a while because we're going to have to let him go do the thing that he's really best at, and like, listen, I'm not going to be jumping on Dan's basketball podcast. I don't know if there is one, but I will not be double dipping on that. So shout out to you for being a real one here, man. I appreciate you. Also, I got to give a shout out before we dive into the viewer's guide to you all out there, the viewers, the listeners. This is our last podcast in the month of September, and I'm not going to bore you all with the numbers. And I'm certainly not doing this to like sit here and backpat myself or anything. But this September was an awesome month for the show. It was it was our best month ever. This is our first year on YouTube, and our YouTube smashed basically all expectations. The podcast downloads smashed. So great month for the show. And look, I would be sitting here talking to my wall about this stuff, like my two dogs, so like for me, it is what it is. I enjoy and I love doing this, but we don't actually get to do it, and it doesn't, become a job without you all, the listeners. So I know everyone that's been on the show shares the sentiment, from Dan to Andy, Scott, Dalton, Austin Eckler. We all share the sentiment. We're really grateful to you all out there that you've made the Yahoo Fantasy Football Show and Eckler's Edge what it was here in a great and, like I said, pretty record-breaking month of September. So I appreciate you all, and I hope you continue to rock with us the rest of the season. Typically, Dan, football content it dwindles off a little bit, as the season goes on. But I promise you, this is going to be a great show throughout the course of the year. So, Dan, we appreciate you for being a part of this September as well.
Oh yeah, no doubt, man. And I'm happy to be a part of it. And, again, special thank you to all the listeners out there, man. It's just really cool what we have going on this year. A lot of changes, but all good changes. And man, on and forward, we got to help some fantasy teams here. And I know a couple of my recommendations flopped last week. So happy to redeem myself here.
Well, listen, we can break as many records of downloads and all that stuff. The one thing we will never be able to break is imperfection. We will not always get everything right, just like you all out there will not always get everything right. Yeah, the Kyle Pitts bros are definitely in Dan's DMs. And I mean, listen with Kyle Pitts, bro, like it is what it is. I'm sure we'll talk about it here very soon here on the Week 4 Viewers Guide. Reminder how this works if you are a new listener, and we've had so many of them, so shout out to all of you. The Binge Stream Skip Preview is what we do here for the Viewers Guide. The Binge games, those are like the shows you can't miss. You're watching them as soon as they're live. You might just crush all the episodes in one weekend. The games you want to stream, those are the shows you certainly watch them. You're probably going to watch them start to finish, but you might be finishing them over a course of a few weeks rather than just it's all there. And lastly, the games you want to skip, those are the shows you're leaning towards passing on, but you might catch an episode here and there. You might just stick to reading the recaps online. Dan, you don't need a refresher on this because you've been on the Viewer's Guide before, but I'll say this, man, going into this week, not as many juicy games, I think, as in weeks past. I have 4 games in the binge category, and a few of them I feel like I'm honestly stretching on.
It's a stretch, yeah.
It's a stretch, bro, but the stream category is huge. So this is a week we really need to try to get our stuff together and get some things right. So let's jump right into the binge category here. This one is obvious, and it needs to be in the binge category. And quite frankly, it should not be a CBS 1 p.m. game, but it is. Miami Dolphins at Buffalo Bills. The Bills are 2.5-point home favorites. It's a beefy 54 projected point total here, Dan. I mean, look, this is one of those games. It belongs to the binge category. You start all your dudes. Are we going to see 70 points between one of these teams like we did last week? Probably not, but I think we will get a lot of offense here.
Yeah, man, load up the chopper. It's going to be a shootout. And that's what we all can hope for as fantasy managers. I mean, the Miami Dolphins, when I was watching Red Zone, I was over a friend's house and I was like, yo, Raheem Mostert scored again. Oh, wait, scored again. Wait, Mostert scored again. Like, this was insane. And then all of a sudden, like, it seemed like that whole time was just, let's just focus on the Dolphins here because they're just going for 350 rushing yards, 7 touchdowns between their running back room. Oh, and by the way, Tyreek Hill goes off again. The Miami Dolphins are an absolute track meet. They're playing a different style of game right now. And to have them play against the Buffalo Bills, a team that's clearly getting better, struggled in week 1, but I think we've seen a lot better of Josh Allen not turning over the ball. James Cook is getting his steady volume as an RB1. And Gabe Davis is doing Gabe Davis things along with Stephon Diggs. So I think this is must-see TV. What are they doing putting this at CBS at 1 o'clock? This should be Sunday Night Football, Monday Night Football type of exposure.
Alas, I think we're 1 week too early into the
changing of the schedules.
The flex schedule.
Flex schedules. There we go.
You can tell it's week 4, the end of September. My brain is already starting to turn to mush. Yeah, the flex schedule. So, man, the Dolphins are crazy right now. The running backs especially. You know, Raheem Mostert is the running back 1 in fantasy. He's the highest scoring running back. Devon Achane, like... He's the 5th scoring fantasy running back right now. Obviously, a lot of it is off for
playing the
rookie. It's all off that last week. But Mostert has been like consistently good. He's got to be like a top. I know Jeff Wilson's coming back at some point, but going forward, he's like a top 15 guy until the wheels fall off of this thing. And look, Mostert's obviously been not the most durable player. You know, there's still like the Jonathan Taylor trade specter in the background. Although if you're Miami, what are you going to give up draft capital for when you already got a good thing going here?
Mm-hmm.
Man, it's just, we talked about this on Eckler's Edge this week. I just don't have any idea as a defense. And I think Buffalo is a good defense. I think Sean McDermott getting his hands deeper in the defensive process here for Buffalo has been a good thing. But how do you go about stopping this offense right now?
It's just too fast. And I think that's why Raheem Mostert's been benefiting, is because you have to guard Tyreek Hill. Like that's first order control. And he's just getting these big running lanes, and the zone offense that they're running, the 21 personnel that they're just executing flawlessly. It can't be stopped, man. And that amount of speed, I just don't know how you can cover it. And Tua's, he's not even getting touched, right? So
no.
It's just the perfect world for the Miami Dolphins. But I think that this will probably be their best test, as you stated, with Sean McDermott taking more control of that defense. This will probably be a closer game than we expect here. And I think that the Dolphins obviously won't put up 70 points again. But it's still going to be a competitive, fantasy-friendly game.
Yeah, no doubt about that. I mean, they have pretty quality linebackers there in Buffalo, despite losing Tremaine Edmonds in this past offseason. Like, that's going to be a big thing when it comes to shutting down the run game. But like you said, you cannot pressure Tua when he gets rid of the ball as fast as he does and still pushes it downfield.
And how far? Yeah.
It's absurd. I just typically with these great offenses, you can at least, even if you're a goofball like me and you, I'm sorry to group you in with the goofballs, Dan, but we're not professional defensive coordinators.
I wear the hat. It's cool.
Yeah. If you're just a couple goofballs sitting at home, we can at least sit here and like theorize. Well, if you double Tyreek and you do this, maybe for some of these great offenses, you can start to kind of put together a little fake defensive plan for it. Just 2 deep safeties, whatever, extra guy in the box to shut down the run. With this, I don't even know. Like, I'm sure one of these guys like that's smarter than us will probably figure it out from a defensive standpoint, but I have no idea how they will. So yeah, I think Miami, it's pretty much play all your guys. Even Jalen Waddle is going to get back in this game. He cleared concussion protocol on Thursday. For the Bills, it's a little bit more difficult. I think we have basically 3 must starts every single week now. Like James Cook has graduated to that group there. But when we're looking at the tight ends, I think it's kind of getting tough with these guys at this point because they're basically cannibalizing each other. And Gabe Davis, I agree with you that I think this is a week. I would have been wrong last week. I would say you don't play Gabe Davis, but he caught one pass. That one pass was for a touchdown. But I think this looks like a pretty good spot here for Gabe Davis.
Yeah, I agreed. I don't really trust much of the Kincaid Knox timeshare there. They're both running a lot of routes and they're on the field, which is great for the 12 personnel. But, this is going to be an interesting matchup that I would probably feel. One person that I think is garnering some interest, Latavius Murray. He's past Damian Harris now on the depth chart. He's actually getting passing down work and he's getting the goal line work. So if you're in a pinch and, maybe you're in a deep 14-team league or something like that, I think Latavius Murray actually might have some appeal here. He might be able to garner, a 3-yard touchdown run or something if they're in the red zone or something like that. Like, I think he could actually do something for your fantasy team if you're in a pinch. But obviously 12-team, 10-team leagues, you wouldn't need to start Latavius Murray, but somebody to keep an eye on at least.
Yeah, high scoring game, that would be kind of the time you'd want to chase him. This next game here in the binge category, look, maybe some will call it a stretch. Maybe you're going to call it a stretch, Dan, but I think Arizona Cardinals at San Francisco 49ers belongs in the binge category, primarily because the San Francisco 49ers are involved here, right? And there's 4 dudes you're pretty much playing every single week. It's CMC, it's Debo, it's Ayuk, it's Kittle. I think even Brock Purdy is in the low end QB1, high end QB2, and super flex, basically an every week starter. But I think we got to give the Cardinals some respect. And we can talk about the 49ers here in a second, but I think we got to give the Cardinals some respect at this point, Dan. They've played solid football. The 49ers are still like 14-point favorites in this game, which, I mean, I don't know. They could certainly come and beat the doors off the Cardinals, but the Cardinals haven't been that team so far to this point. So am I crazy for putting Josh Dobbs, who might finally now have his jersey available in the team store, am I crazy for putting them in the binge category?
I think it's a little early to put him in the binge category, but you're right. I mean, there is a lot of fantasy potential here. I do think it's going to be tough sledding for James Conner. He's been rock solid in terms of what fantasy managers expected him to do. He's getting a ton of snap share. He's getting the red zone looks that I didn't think were actually going to be that prevalent this year because I didn't think Arizona was going to be particularly good. But he's going up against a 49ers team that, they're only letting up 37 rushing yards per game to opposing running backs. Mm-hmm. And there might be some opportunity for him in the pass game, especially if this game gets out of hand like the spread is projecting. But I don't know, man. I think Josh Dobbs is hearing all the shade, and he's like, I'm ready for it. I think this game, it's a divisional game, man. 14 points in a divisional matchup. That seems a bit much to me. And I just want to shout out Josh Dobbs, man. That comeback that he had for Micah Parsons, where he's dodging the he's dodging the darts, right? The darts, right? Yeah. That was cool, man. So he's taking this in stride. They're playing with house money right now, so they have nothing to lose. I would feel comfortable starting Hollywood Brown. I would feel comfortable starting Zach Ertz. I don't know that I would go too much further on the Cardinals front.
Yeah, I think Hollywood Brown's emergence along with Josh Dobbs' solid, steady play there has been a really welcome development. Like, Marquise Brown's a good player. I know he's not like a star or anything, but he's a really quality, I would say probably NFL number 2 receiver, but he's the one on this team and he's getting top 15 target share, air yard share among all pass catchers right now. So I really like the way Hollywood Brown sets up in a potential pass heavy game script here. I don't know that we need to say too much on the 49ers.
No.
You play all these guys every single week. Yeah, start your guys. All right, next one up.
How much
here.
concern do you have for Brandon Ayuk coming off of that shoulder injury? Do you think he's good? Obviously he's been practicing this week. Are you starting him with confidence?
I think I'm starting him, even though this Cardinals defense, maybe even more than the offense, has outkicked my expectations, because just looking at it on paper, Dan, at least with this offense, like, I think people were and it looks really bad in hindsight for these people that were like, they're just going to start Josh Dobbs and they're going to cut Colt McCoy. I mean, come on, man. Like, Josh Dobbs actually played solid football for the Titans last year after getting there with even less notice than the damn Cardinals brought him in this year. He knew the system. And then Marquise Brown, like I said, good player. James Conner, good player, even through durability questions. And Zach Ertz, I'm surprised he is honestly playing this much, but he still is a proven veteran. On the defensive side, it was just like Budda Baker and nobody basically heading into this year. So the way this defense is played has definitely outkicked my expectations. Nevertheless, though, I still think like all of these guys have favorable matchups. I think Ayuk has a favorable matchup. I'm encouraged by the fact that he sat out last week's game, and hopefully that makes it, because it's mostly just like a pain tolerance injury. Right. I'm hoping that having some time off, especially from all the way from last week, Thursday, everything, hopefully he should be good to go in this one. I feel pretty confident about it.
Sounds good. I'm starting him, putting him in there.
Yeah. Me too. So maybe I'm just talking myself into it. Next game up here, Baltimore Ravens at Cleveland Browns in the binge category. This is a CBS 1 p.m. game as well. The Browns defense is probably one of the 3 best defenses in the NFL right now, along with Dallas and San Francisco. So this game, I could see it being not that high scoring. There's only a 40.5 over under, but the Ravens are really banged up on defense. They're banged up everywhere. Classic, of course. Like the receiver room is really banged up. So I think there's pretty clear, like you're starting Lamar Jackson, you're starting Zay Flowers, probably, even though it's not a great defensive matchup. Mark Andrews obviously as well, but some of the guys on the fringes in Cleveland, how are we feeling about them in this matchup going against, again, a banged up Baltimore defense?
Yeah, I think Elijah Moore is the person that I would definitely start here. Coming off a decent game, but not great. But I think Amari Cooper's been drawing so much attention. That's where Baltimore's focus is really going to be. So I think Elijah Moore will see him kind of start to emerge here. And I know I had a lot of slander for Deshaun Watson. He answered the call, man. He showed up last week, and that was the matchup for him to get right, and he did. So I think this is going to be a competitive game. These AFC North games are always just slugfest. And no matter how injured this Baltimore Ravens team is, I think they'll still come out and try to compete, especially with the Cleveland team, really strong defense. It's going to be a big Lamar game, really important game for Lamar. Really concerned about the running back room for the Ravens. I don't really know.
Yeah.
Not really getting much out of Gus Edwards here. Justice Hill is still around. I mean, we'll see. Melvin Gordon got elevated to the practice squad. I'm hard pressed to start anybody outside of like the main guys here. Mark Andrews, Zay Flowers he got 10 targets last week. So obviously he's going to be a focal point of their pass game. And then you got Amari Cooper on the Cleveland side and Elijah Moore. And obviously, Cleveland defense got to start them too.
Yeah, Amari's played really well this year. He's been really good on contested catches, which has not really always been the consistent theme of Amari Cooper's career. So I think he's played, I said this about him last year. I think last year was his best season of his NFL career. And I think this year he's basically keeping up with that. Like he's playing really good, consistent football with a quarterback who's not playing really good, consistent football. And like, I think it's a little premature to take the L on Deshaun Watson, Dan, because even if we were skeptical of him going into this past week, the Titans defense is not like a real serious pass defense.
That was the
matchup.
game for if he was going to play well, like that was the game to do it. Kind of similar to where I'm at with Justin Fields this week, which we'll talk about a little bit. Like some matchups are just favorable for the quarterbacks. And if you play well in that situation, cool, you'll have a great week, but it doesn't tell the whole story as you're suggesting.
No, it definitely does not. So I think this defense, again, a lot of injuries, but this is a real good test case for Deshaun. If he can stack a solid game on top of a really nice performance last week, although he had the one like goofball pass back to Elijah Moore. That was obviously everybody had their fun with that, deservedly so. But yeah, I think this is more of a real quality test for Deshaun. I'm glad you brought up Elijah Moore because it's been like weirdly frustrating for him so far because like the peripheral numbers look really good, right? 23.5% target share, the same as Amari Cooper. Obviously Cooper's been a little banged up at times. 24%, he's been targeted on 24% of his routes run. That looks really good. But like the actual yardage on those, because he's only been getting targeted 7.5 yards down the field, and mostly the passes that are connecting are the shorter ones. So there's been some decent yak moments, but again, I want to see them kind of be a little better with the usage for Elijah Moore here, which I think can come in time. They're still trying to break that into the offense, and I do think we will see more and more and more this offense transition away from the Nick Chubb version of the offense where it's under center and play action and it's just shotgun spread, shoot it downfield type stuff with Deshaun. Those were the moments even last week where he was really good. So I think we'll consistently see that throughout the course of the year with Deshaun Watson and the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, I agree. They got to take more shots down the field too. He's only had a couple of targets beyond 20 yards this year, and one of them was for a 50-yard gain. So like, I feel like they just need to push the ball down the field a little bit more and try to use them outside of that short and intermediate routes. Cause he's being successful there, but you just got to utilize your receiver and his talents a little bit more.
All right. Monday Night Football, our final game in the binge category, only 4 games, man. And like I said, some of them were a stretch. Seattle Seahawks at New York Giants. And again, I think you could say putting the Giants in the binge category is a bit of a stretch based on how they played. But Dan, I would contend that Daniel Jones has run into two of the three best defenses in the NFL so far. And obviously, the Giants were throttled against Dallas. They were throttled against San Francisco. But solid performance, mostly in the second half against the Arizona Cardinals, who are not an unserious defense, as we just covered. So I actually feel pretty good about Daniel Jones and the passing game going into this one. Quietly, I think the reemergence of Wan'Dale Robinson is going to give them more out of that slot receiver role than Paris Campbell. I'm not like running out to start Wan'Dale Robinson or anything, but just more dudes at Daniel Jones's disposal, I think is good. And I do think this matchup against Seattle is much closer to like the Arizona game than the first two, or the first and third game for Daniel Jones.
Yeah, man, I like the total on this one at 47.5. And there's certainly some must-start potential. Kenny Walker, no-brainer. DK, Lockett, Geno. On the Giants side, man, it's just hard for me to trust anyone outside of Darren Waller, and he's barely been someone that you can trust. But to your point, getting Wan'Dale Robinson back in the fold, perhaps that gives a little bit more attention to somebody else that has speed, Daniel Jones can get the ball out quicker. Perhaps that opens up the offense a little bit more. And it also helps if you can get Saquon Barkley back, which is also going to be big for them. But their offensive line trouble, that's what's been holding them back.
Yeah.
And I just don't know that I'm ready to trot out anyone outside of Waller and Barkley right now until they solve that, at least in the short term. And this could be the game to do it. Seattle does have a beatable defense. You know, the Rams took them to school last week. So yeah, I don't really know. This is going to be a tough one for me, but it's a little fishy to see that the Giants are favored in this one.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Seattle right now, 16.7% pressure rate. That's a bottom 5 mark. The Giants are also in the bottom 5, which is why I think this game could be pretty good for both the quarterbacks. Who would you rank higher going into this game, actually, Geno or Daniel Jones? And I'm not asking you just because I actually have these two guys on one roster.
I'm about to say, if you have those two guys on your roster, that's kind of tough. Although Geno's been okay. He's been like, top 15 quarterback-ish.
We somehow survived week one. And actually, I think I've only lost one because it's one of these leagues where you do your head-to-head matchup and like against the average points. So I've only lost one head-to-head matchup, but won the point. So I'm like, 5-1 or whatever.
So how are you feeling about that? Just sidebar. Do you like having to go against the median? I think it actually levels the playing field a little bit. Like you don't get those people that are winning those 85 to 80 weeks. And they're like, oh, yes, I won my week. But like, you really didn't have that good of a week. I feel like there should be some kind of, I feel like it's a nice balancing of the numbers. I don't know. It just seems like it's a better approach, but I haven't been able to sell many people on it in my home leagues.
I like it for actually the inverse, where again, like me last week, I went against the team who's 6-0. Shout out to Graham Barfield from Fantasy Points. He's 6-0 in the Apex Writers League. I'm 5-1. The only loss, like I said, was to Graham last week, and it's because frickin' Graham had Raheem Mostert last week. So it's like, well, for God's sakes, I scored a boatload of points. He just scored more points because he has Raheem Mostert. Like I said, I think he might have Keenan Allen as well. So it's like, okay, well, I ain't winning that week, or excuse me, he has AJ Brown, not Keenan Allen. But it's like, okay,
but you still did numbers.
Right. I'm going against Raheem Mostert. I'm going against Jalen Hurts, and I'm going against AJ Brown and TJ Hawkinson, who had a pretty big week too. I'm not going to win, right? Mostly because he's got damn Mostert, but I still get some credit for having a really good week myself. So yeah, I think I do like it actually.
Yeah. I'm trying to get. I know that Yahoo just recently implemented that as a feature, and I hope that there'll be more adoption there because it's just, I don't know, it just balances the league out a little bit more from the bad people that get overcorrected for their crappy wins. But then also if you play really well, you still get something in return because you had a great week. So yeah, but yeah, going back to this game that you have in a binge category. I don't know. I think this is more of a stream for me, just based off the amount of people that are available to start here. Oof, yeah, I can't go too much further than that. Yeah,
fair enough. We'll see if Saquon Barkley plays. He participated in individual drills today, so we'll see. All right, let's take a quick break and let's get into the stream category for Week 4. All right, Dan, first game up in the stream category. It's the London game, the Toy Story game. It's the Atlanta Falcons at, quote unquote, at Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jags are 3-point favorites. This game, you could argue that it belongs in the stream category, but I'm punishing both of these teams for being weird to start the season. I'm punishing obviously Atlanta because they're coming off a really bad performance where their offensive line really disappointed last week. They got this line has actually been sneaky underperforming, and so much weirdness is going on with Jacksonville. So is this a get right game for both of these teams, Dan? And will you be watching the Toy Story version?
So this game I actually think belongs in the binge just because, hey, we got football, way earlier in the day than we normally would have. On the Pacific time, I don't know that I'm gonna be waking up 6. Well, actually I am. I got my 2-year-old, so I'll probably have football on while he's eating his Cheerios or whatever, which is always awesome. So the fact that I get to watch football that early is good. In terms of, I have some Trevor Lawrence shares, man, and I'm starting to sweat a little bit. And he hasn't been that great. He's actually been borderline terrible. He had one good week, and the rest have been pretty mediocre. Calvin Ridley had that monster first game, and then he's kind of been middle of the road since then. So I think this is a good get right spot for Jacksonville. They're going to be in London for 2 weeks. So, I think that they'll be used to the area, and, they have plenty of time to practice and get everything together. But in terms of, I think this is, any overseas game, I feel like I want to bet the over to it. They're playing in front of new fans, trying to broaden that audience. I feel like the refs will probably be a little bit more favorable to some calls. So I think this is a perfect spot for all of the fantasy players that you're thinking about starting. The, Bijan Robinson, obviously auto start, but Tyler Algier, I think would be very interesting. Curious, do you think that Atlanta would benefit from doing like a Miami Dolphins, San Francisco type of 21 personnel type of scheme? Like the way that they use the 2 running backs, like why would you not want to get Tyler Algier more opportunities to get those? I don't know, just those opportunities, like the way that the Dolphins deployed their 2 running back strategy, which is awesome last week. I feel like they have the running back room and the offensive line to be able to do something like that. Just surprised that they haven't. Yeah,
I actually might liken it more towards like what the Packers theoretically would do with Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon.
Okay. Yeah.
Just like Algier has so much more juice than AJ Dillon does, but the Packers have used Aaron Jones as kind of like a movable chess piece, and at times they've used him as like a pre-snap motion eye candy guy. That actually would make perfect sense for Bijan, right? Because he's been such an explosive pass catching option for them. I think that would actually be like, if I was to liken it to a team that we've seen use 2 backs rather successfully. I'm putting it with rather successfully because we just have not gotten a lot of good out of AJ Dillon so far this year, especially.
No.
I think that would actually probably be the best like team to compare it to.
Okay, I feel that. But yeah, outside of that, man, Travis Etienne starting him, Drake London obviously starting him. I think the real question is the man of the hour, Kyle Pitts. Do you go back to the well or not? And if you picked up, if it were I didn't have any Kyle Pitts shares. But if I'm looking for like the Jake Fergusons of the world, even Tyler Higbee is getting more volume than Kyle Pitts and been more successful. So yeah, I'll probably be looking for waivers. And then if you have a start-sit decision, maybe just based on matchup, whether you want to deploy Kyle Pitts or not. But I'm not mad at you if you're looking elsewhere at this point.
Did you see the rumors this week about Kyle Pitts being traded to the Cowboys? And did you see that?
I did not.
Don't get excited about it. Don't get excited about it because
Jake Ferguson's been solid, man. I don't know why they would need to give up anything when they have something that's performing well.
This was like a pure, the internet wants something to happen. So like people were saying like, what if this would happen? Yeah. And then like all the loser aggregator accounts were like rumors. And it's like no one actually credible is saying that, like give me a break. So I think the reality with Kyle Pitts is that he just doesn't really look right now because we also forget he's coming back from a serious MCL injury. I think I've seen a few people hearken it to like how J.K. Dobbins looked at times last year.
Yeah,
so
I
think
especially out in space, he just looks like he's just kind of the stride isn't quite there yet.
He's got a hitch in his giddy up, as we like to say out here in the country. So Kyle Pitts, I think he's on that borderline. I do like Drake London as a bounce back, primarily because, Doug Peterson was flummoxed even to give an answer for why they can't rush the passer there and down in Jacksonville. So, and lastly on Ridley, I do think this would be a game to like see the best out of Calvin Ridley. There's definitely been some rusty moments for him, penalties, false starts, drops, like some moments where he just hasn't looked like completely comfortable being back at full speed football. There's been other times where he has, but this is his former team. You mentioned it's the overseas game. I think we see a big game out of Calvin Ridley here this weekend. Don't hold me to it though, but it makes sense to chase it in this one.
I mean,
Next game up here.
You're not benching him, so
no, exactly. You're not benching him.
We ride with Ridley.
That's right. Next game up here, Cincinnati Bengals, 2-point favorites in Tennessee. The Titans offense is broken, bro. And even like the Bengals offense is sneaky broken too. But this was one game where I would love to put this in the skip category, but how can you do that with the names on Cincinnati's side?
Yeah, I think that's fair. And Chase is coming off a monster game, 12 receptions, career high. Joe Burrow, I'm definitely concerned, man. He is just not throwing the ball far. And he just, anytime he gets any kind of pressure, man, it's a sack. So I feel good about Joe Mixon. I think he's going to continue to get fed, and, he's dominating all of the carries there for the most part. The Tennessee side of the ball, man, it's a struggle, man. Derrick Henry cannot get going because they're always playing from behind. Tannehill doesn't have much on the outside. You mentioned Treylon Burks really only does one thing right, and he did it. He did it last week. He caught his one pass like down the sideline on a go route, but he didn't really do much else outside of that. So I'm not really seeing much start appeal on the Titans side of the ball, and on the Bengals side, it's your mainstays of Chase, Mixon, and T. Higgins, and outside of that, I'm like. And honestly, if I'm a Joe Burrow manager, I'd probably be looking for some insurance on waivers. Like, there's probably some decent quarterbacks out there that you might be able to stream if you're worried about this Tennessee defense being. I mean, they did just get torched by Deshaun Watson, so
this isn't the week I'm worried about
this week. But,
this isn't the week I'm worried about it with. But I like your point here overall. Because I think if you have Burrow as your QB1, even if though you drafted him as like a set it and forget it guy, until we see him running like the normal Joe Burrow offense where they're pushing it downfield, where he's moving around. And by the way, like, I don't know if we're going to see that all year as long as he continues to play through this calf injury. Because like, he can say he didn't aggravate it during the game, and maybe he didn't, but it's not going to get better by him playing on it. Like, that's pretty much not going to happen. So against Tennessee, I think, Higgins can bounce back after kind of a weird drop game against the Rams on Monday night. Obviously, Chase is a monster. I think all of the "should I panic about Jamar Chase" tweets were cute, but those are over. Those are gone now. But for weeks like luckily it's right after the bye week for the Bengals because, hopefully he's a little bit better by then. But like week 8 in San Francisco, week 9 against Buffalo, that might be a period of time where I'm a little nervous about Burrow if we haven't seen him play close to his peak form. But to schedule the next 3 weeks in Tennessee this week, in Arizona, I know their defense is better than expected, but still I would put it in a favorable matchup category. And then Seattle, definitely a favorable matchup in week 6. So it's like after that I start to get nervous, but hopefully that offsets with the bye week there.
Yeah, that's the hope. But with the lack of mobility, man, if he gets any kind of pressure, it's a sack or he's throwing it away. This offense is just really struggling right now. So it's kind of hard to get too excited about the Bengals right now. But this, if you were going to look into upside here, at least it's the Tennessee Titans that you're going up against. So start your guys, but don't get cute about it. Like D-Hop, I wouldn't start D-Hop at this point. Like, he's a flex guy. And if you probably have better options to start in your wide receiver 2 spot, but I don't know, the way that the Titans offense looks, man, it's ugly out there.
Next game up here, LA Rams at Indianapolis Colts, 47-point over-under. I can see this game going either way. I could see this game being under this total. I could see it being a very fantasy-friendly environment. There's a lot of guys that I would consider starting in this matchup. Obviously, on the Rams side, it comes down to the health of the offensive line because we saw as soon as they started losing dudes against the Bengals, Trey Hendrickson and the boys just went wild on Monday night. The Colts are kind of smack dab in the middle in terms of pressure rate. They don't have like a Trey Hendrickson guy. I mean, they have DeForest Buckner. He's a game wrecker in the middle, but they don't have like a true edge rusher like that at this point. But still, again, a lot of guys sort of on the fringes here. How do you view this game?
I like the mainstays for the Rams. Kyron Williams, RB1 right now. Continue to ride him. Puka saved his fantasy day with a 35-yard reception. But I mean, he's consistent, man. You can't not start him. Zach Moss, I would feel comfortable about starting until Jonathan Taylor comes back. Like, that's his backfield, and he's been running angry. He was one of the best running backs last week, so like I don't see any reason why you wouldn't start him. Michael Pittman's been phenomenal. I think you could put him into that Mike Evans category of very surprising, underrated guys that went in the middle rounds of drafts that's exceeding expectations. And obviously, Anthony Richardson's back. So, you got to start him. The other person I would probably put into the must start is Tutu Atwell. And I love Tutu, man. He's just been getting so much volume. The way that they've been scheming him in the run game as well. He had that 22-yard rush that could have been a touchdown, just barely stepped out. But he's getting a lot of targets, man. 8 targets in his last 3 games. Never seen less than 50 yards in each game this season, and he's got 2 touchdowns in 3 weeks. So I don't see why you wouldn't start him. And the other one other question I guess I had was, how good is this Indianapolis defense from a fantasy perspective? Because they scored 11 points the first week and 9 the last 2. They're getting pressure. I mean, they're getting sacks. Whether they're not pressuring that much is a different story. But like Kwity Paye's playing well. They're getting the turnovers. This is actually like a quietly decent defense right now. And if the Rams don't have their tackle situation figured out, I don't know. They might be able to get to Matt Stafford the same way the Bengals did.
True. They are second in the NFL, tied with Buffalo and Dallas with 12 sacks. So that's a good call by you. That could be an area, even if, again, they haven't consistently pressured the quarterback, if they can get those sacks, it will at least make their fantasy defense viable. And I agree with you on Tutu Atwell, too. 62% of his routes have come as an outside receiver, and that is really where Indianapolis struggles. I think that might be why they've been able to sack the quarterback but not pressure the quarterback, probably, because their outside cornerbacks are a weak spot. So it's a good spot for Tutu. It's a good spot for Puka, I think, to have closer to, not the games we were expecting. If you were expecting the first 2 weeks, like, you're not always going to get those, but somewhere between the first 2 weeks and the third week, I think we could see that from him. Lastly, just on Zach Moss, it's still apparently Jonathan Taylor doesn't want to play for this team. And Dan Graziano from ESPN reported that, would say that he won't be surprised if his first game this year comes with him in a different uniform. Like, Zach Moss, we might just be riding this thing all year long, man. And he has just not left the field. Him and Kyron Williams, ironically, the other running back in this game, they've just not left the field.
It's crazy, man. And I don't think anyone expected Zach Moss to have this much of an influence in fantasy football this year, but that's the way things roll sometimes, and it's next man up. And the fact that he hasn't resolved his contractual issues yet, that being Jonathan Taylor, I see no reason why you can't start Zach Moss as an RB2 going forward until that happens. So yeah, keep riding him out. And then now that they have Anthony Richardson back, I think that this offense is going to be more explosive. Gardner Minshew is solid, man. He pushed the ball down the field. He got it done in a tough matchup versus the Ravens last week. But I think Anthony Richardson just changes this offense a little bit more. And I'm really excited to see what Zach Moss looks like with him too.
Yeah, Josh Downs not a bad sleeper either. He's been getting a lot of looks, and I love that dude's talent. Next game up here, Washington Commanders at Philadelphia Eagles. Eagles are 8-point favorites. Look, I think we know what the deal with the Eagles are. DeAndre Swift, I think, has got himself, would you agree, in must-start territory?
Oh, he's there. He's there, and he's not giving it back, man. I don't know. He just looks like a different running back. It's like, wow, what, Detroit, did you know what you had in your hands here? You refused to run this guy between the tackles, and now look at him. He's just running angry. Just so motivated. Like, their offense is definitely cooking. I still have a little bit of questions. Like, the passing game doesn't look quite there yet, but it's going to come, man. They're still adjusting to this new offensive coordinator, Brian Johnson. But I feel pretty good. If you have DeAndre Swift, like, you start him. Don't no questions asked.
Agree. I really hesitated with this one, almost put it in the binge category, but then I look at Sam Howell's box score. After I said that, like, literally last week, I said his biggest strength is his biggest weakness is that he's going to hold the ball and he's going to fire that thing, but he's also going to hold the ball and get destroyed. Well, last week he was firing it to the other team and he was getting destroyed back there. Like, you just can't take that many sacks and turn the ball over that much and not be on, like, the I'm going to get benched radar, especially when you're a former day 3 draft pick and you have a backup, like a steady Eddie backup in Jacoby Brissett on the roster. So my hesitation with putting this in the binge category comes down to, what are we going to get out of Sam Howell in this game? And can we get the ball to Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson, please?
I mean, I wish we could get it to Jahan Dotson. I mean, I know he was a sleeper for a lot of fantasy analysts out there, yourself included, and I have tons of shares of him. We got to get him the ball, man. And Terry McLaurin, he needs to get the ball as well. They're just not being able to get. I mean, maybe it's just Sam Howell just holding the ball for too long and trying to make that big play. And this is going to be a tough one for him because he's going to have Jalen Carter in his face all day. Just an absolute monster. Those Georgia dogs are going to get after him. So I don't know. Hopefully Bieniemy can make the proper adjustments to get him in a position. I don't know. Maybe you just let him run free a little bit. Maybe get some more design rollouts, get him to get the ball out quicker so he's not having to hold the ball and make those decisions on the fly under center. But yeah, I don't know what corrections they make, but Brian Robinson, I think that this could be a good game for him. They're gonna have to establish the run here and try to beat the Eagles in the trenches, because if they don't, this one's gonna get away from them. 8 points is a lot for a divisional game, especially on the Eagles turf. But I don't know. I think we'll see McLaurin at least break out this week. I think he'll have a fine game, even though he's matched up against Darius Slay for most of it. I think he'll have his opportunities. But Jahan Dotson, I don't know, man. When's it gonna happen, man? It's got to happen at some point.
Yeah, we need a prove-it game, I think, before you can play him in fantasy. But he's the type of guy that I think if you end up dropping him, you're going to regret it, because he never leaves the field. He's just way too good. And these guys, like, it comes around for them eventually. He was never promised to be anything more than like a wide receiver 3 at best anyways. Like if you drafted him, he's your wide receiver 2, like you drafted a bad fantasy team. But I think eventually it will come. But again, you need to see it before you actually play him.
Do you think it will come for Dallas Goedert?
I think he is the one suffering from like the passing game not firing on all cylinders, like you said. And that makes sense, because you can have I don't know, what would you call the Eagles pass game so far this year? Like B-, C+?
Probably a C+.
Yeah.
Like obviously AJ Brown got the squeaky wheel. Like he was like, all right, I'm going to complain. Like, you got to throw me the ball. Okay, cool. Here you go. Go off for 130 yards. But I think it's just a matter of like, what Jalen Hurts is taking, what the defenses are giving him. It seems like Dallas Goedert's just becoming that safety blanket on third downs, short intermediate routes, and around the middle of the field. They're not really scheming for him. Not that they really had to before, but when you have such dynamic makers on the outside and the rushing game is working the way that it is, he just becomes, the afterthought. So I think it's just probably more of that. I can't drop him. I'm not going to do that. But there's just it's such a weak position that you just have to trot out Dallas Goedert and hope for the touchdown at this point, because I don't think he's going to get the volume to sustain being, a consistent top 5 tight end this season.
Yeah, I'm with you. The Eagles offense has to be much better. Like, you can have a C+ offense, and these two receivers are so good. They're still going to eat, and maybe not both in the same week, but one of those two dudes is going to absolutely eat. But it's going to be tough to trickle it down to the tight end, because even in a best case scenario, he's, I think, the third most talented pass catcher, and just those guys are so good that I think he's like a distant third in terms of the pecking order there.
That's fair.
Next game up here, Minnesota Vikings at Carolina Panthers. Look, the Vikings are a fantasy warhorse right now. They're not a good team, but Kirk Cousins is throwing the piss out of the ball. We obviously have Justin Jefferson. We have KJ Osborne, and Jordan Addison and TJ Hawkinson are all top 20 in terms of routes run right now in the NFL. Like, Addison's workload is continuing to grow. He's still a little bit up and down as an individual player, but I think we just are going to see him get more and more work, especially on downfield targets. And Alexander Mattison, we'll see if Cam Akers is active and if he's really in the game plan. But for now, he's just had like an unbelievable role in fantasy. And you could kind of say the same thing for Miles Sanders, who's had a boatload of targets, but the offense is just so toothless on the other side. This game I have a really tough time reading here, Titus.
Yeah, agreed. I think the one person that's established himself, as you mentioned with the Vikings, you're going to start all those guys. Maybe not KJ Osborne. You'd probably have to start him if you're in like a 3 wide receiver league or something like that, or super flex where you don't have, a defense or a kicker type of thing. But yeah, the other side of the ball though is Adam Thielen. I think he's probably getting slept on the most. Like, I picked him up in 112 team league. Like, why he was dropped, I don't know. But I think it's because he's like, he's the old guy and not that great of an offense. Andy Dalton was starting last week, but he's put together 2 really good weeks. And I think he's someone that certainly has flex appeal, just because who else are they going to throw to right now? Like, DJ Shark had a good game. And it was funny. I couldn't just because I got a 2-year-old, I couldn't get Baby Shark out of my head. So I he scored a touchdown. I was like, DJ Shark did. I don't know. It's, oh God.
What a life.
I know. Stick to the dog life. You ain't got to worry about those associations, but
you got it, pal.
But yeah, outside of that, like I'm not really going to rely on DJ Shark to ball out every week. Like I think
Mhm.
Adam Thielen is the one that's going to be a consistent performer here. He's going to get the targets. He has the routes run, sure hands. I think Adam Thielen's probably the more underrated person to start out of this bunch. And Miles Sanders is even like without that receiving game, he wouldn't have a great game. So, until their rushing game really shows itself, like I don't know that he's more than a flex right now in fantasy. I don't know that I trust him solely as an RB2.
Yep, I'm with you on both of those calls. Adam Thielen revenge game is very live here in week 4. Pittsburgh Steelers at Houston Texans. Houston's offense has been awesome. CJ Stroud has been incredible. It's just flying colors. Like we're doing grades. By the time people have listened to this, it'll already have happened. But Fantasy Football Live, we're doing great, like grading the rookie performances so far. I gave CJ Stroud an A+. I think he's just been, especially circumstances considered, he's been incredible. That has obviously trickled down to the pass catchers. And I know like Steelers defense going against this offensive line in Houston, little scary, but Pittsburgh has been stung by outside receivers. So I think this is a big week for both Nico Collins and Tank Dell against this Pittsburgh secondary.
Yeah, start these guys, man. And I should have had an inkling of thought of how good CJ Stroud could be when he showed up at Ruben's Hampton's party in the offseason with all these like celebrities
The big
and
wigs,
Tom
yeah.
Brady. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm like, how did he get invited to that party? Because he's a dog, I guess. And man, he's just been balling. And Tank Dell, you got to read the reports, man. This guy told the front office, I want this guy. And look at him. He's going off. And Tank Dell was a very popular dude in the dynasty circles, but I think redraft leagues probably wasn't very popular. But like, with the way that this offense is running and how bad their offensive line is, I mean, they're hurt, but, they're going to be throwing the ball. And so Collins and Tank Dell are going to be the immediate beneficiaries of that. And I think it shows. And Pittsburgh's defense, they're going to be getting a lot of pressure. That ball's going to be coming out. I'm all for starting Tank Dell and Nico Collins this week. Other side of the ball, George Pickens. I think he's got a pretty steady role now. Freiermuth found the end zone, which is awesome. He's another one of those guys that I put in like that Dallas Goedert territory of like boomer bust. You got to score a touchdown to really be not fantasy relevant, but reliable, I should say, at that position. But that running back room for the Pittsburgh Steelers, oof. I'm sweating if I got Najee Harris, but I think everyone's been saying that. The Twitterverse hates, the Xverse hates Najee Harris. But Jaylen Warren, man, do you have the stones to start him as a flex position? Has he earned that yet?
The thing is, like, he is not going to have real, true, like running back 2 or even high end flex appeal. I mean, he's definitely in the what the heck flex category. Like, all right, especially once we get to bye weeks, he's going to be a guy we consider more.
Mm-hmm.
But right now, like, unless he really starts taking more work away from Najee Harris, you just don't want a piece of this backfield right now at this point, because it's the worst of both worlds, where like you have the passing down space back who's not going to get enough work behind a terrible offensive line that can't push can't push guys around. Like, you're not going to have enough there. You're not going to have enough really with Najee Harris, obviously, because he's ceding touches to Jaylen Warren. So it's just the worst of both worlds. Like, the fact that Najee Harris is declining to me in fantasy value, and like, he's got stones tied to his ankles. He's declining so fast at this point. That doesn't mean that Jaylen Warren is rising to me. But I think it's a big test for the pass game. Like, again, we saw them get over on Pittsburgh, not consistently, but there were at least bigger plays there. This is another good spot to do it. While the damn Jags couldn't take advantage of it necessarily last week, this is still a very banged up secondary. So I think it's a good week to chase George Pickens. We're not really starting Kenny Pickett or any of these other guys, but again, I want to see what this offense does in this matchup.
Agreed. Do you think that, Deontay is going to be, he's on the PUP list now, or the IL. Do you think that George Pickens can kind of run away with this wide receiver 1 status for the Steelers? Or do you think he's pretty much going to have a few weeks of balling out and then, fantasy manager will just relegate him to the bench again?
I don't know that he'll be bench status, but like, again, we need to find out what Kenny Pickett is. And like, can he be a guy that can support 2 dudes? Because I think these guys are both dudes. Like, they're very, very different. But I think, well, the way once Deontay's back, like, I will view this passing game pretty similar to how I did going into the year, where I think George Pickens is like a wide receiver 3. I think Deontay will be a wide receiver 2 because he's always open. He's like the first read every single time. And then Pickens will be kind of that volatile 3 who will give you big weeks, but then he'll give you some slower weeks too. And honestly, we've seen that even without Deontay so far.
Right.
Like he's been that guy.
That's fair. Yeah, I agree.
Next game up here, Las Vegas Raiders at Los Angeles Chargers. Look, theoretically, this should be a game in the binge category. The Raiders have just been weird so far. Like we haven't gotten Josh Jacobs going. This is obviously the matchup to get him going against the LA Chargers. Jacoby Myers has been awesome. Devontae Adams has been awesome. We might get Austin Eckler back in this game. You know, he's been telling us on the pod, he's been working his ass off to get back out there. We started to see him back at practice a little bit so far this week. So look, if he's out there against the Raiders, that's obviously a great matchup for him to return. We know that Keenan Allen's awesome. We know that Justin Herbert's awesome. We know that this is our first look at what the split between Josh Palmer and Quentin Johnston will be without Mike Williams. Obviously, the big thing is the status of Jimmy Garoppolo in this game. Obviously, he's in the concussion protocol. He remains in the concussion protocol as of the time we're taping this. So if we get like Brian Hoyer or Aiden O'Connell, that's why I've got this game in the like stream category and I couldn't push it up to binge.
That's fair. I mean, would you have any hesitation of not starting Devontae Adams if Garoppolo didn't play?
Hey, buddy, I think you could go out. You're in Oakland. I mean, they're old stomping grounds. You could probably go out there, and I think Devontae Adams could at least get to like 50 yards and have a chance at a touchdown. I don't know what your arm is like, Dan, but even my like shredded shoulder, I don't know. Maybe that's where we draw the line. I got a bad, like I said, bad shoulder. You know, not much of an athlete, bad knee, all that. Maybe Devontae Adams can't get it done with me. But I think he can get it done with like Brian Hoyer and Aiden O'Connell, who was really good in the preseason.
Yeah, he was. I am more concerned about Devontae Adams' comments about them and their lack of ability to win games and their motivations and their preparation. I don't know if he's trying to. I mean, he's trying to send a message like, y'all got to get better, figure this out. Or I don't know what that what if is. Like, does he demand a trade holdout type of situation? But for now, from a fantasy perspective, like, yeah, Devontae Adams is coming off a monster game. So I think he'll be fine regardless. But probably my biggest question mark, like as you said, start all those guys that you mentioned, and could be the breakout game for Josh Jacobs that fantasy managers have been looking for. But the Josh Palmer, Quentin Johnston situation, Palmer's been dominating those snaps. Like he dominated most of the snaps. And I was looking at waivers just to kind of get a feel for where people were going. And rightfully so, more people spent money on Josh Palmer than Johnston. But how much do you see Johnston's role emerging now that Mike Williams is out for the season? And did fantasy managers do the right thing by prioritizing Josh Palmer over Johnston?
I think, look, and I've seen people like fighting about this on Twitter. Like, oh, if you pick up Josh Palmer over Quentin Johnston, you don't even like know how to play fantasy because you need to always be shooting for upside. Like, oh my God, shut up. Go outside and touch grass. Like, it's
the
still,
dude's not even running that many. He's not even getting that many snaps. Like, how can you just say that?
Right. And I think the theory there, and I'm not out on this theory, is that Quentin Johnston is going to be one of these second half of the year rookies, and he has more upside than Josh Palmer, which, by the way, I agree with. Because Josh Palmer is like, he's a solid number 3 receiver. He's now going to get pushed into being a number 2 receiver. I do think it will go better for him in replacing Mike Williams than it went last year where he had to kind of replace Keenan Allen while Mike Williams was still on the field. Mm-hmm. That was not good. Like he can't be that guy. So I think if you're looking for just like replaceable production, I think obviously Palmer is the guy, especially as we come in here to bye weeks. Because there's a very real scenario where we get to like week 10 and we still haven't seen a ton of Quentin Johnston because they are not ready to play this guy. And he was not ready to play to start the year. And how much has he grown in just 4 weeks in the NFL? I don't know that it's been that much. I mean, again, I'm watching like when I'm charting Keenan Allen and stuff, you know, they're still like telling Quentin Johnston where to line up on the field. Like we're still at that point. So that can change very, very fast, and Quentin Johnston can end up being like a big league winner type. I'm not ruling that out, but to tell people like they're stupid for not believing that that's possible, like it's probably a 50-50 proposition what happens here.
Yeah, I think that it's in this matchup, I would feel good about starting Josh Palmer in probably a flex wide receiver 2, depending on the format, because Mike Williams was having a great season, and Kellen Moore the way that he's been drawing up this scheme. It hasn't been much of this is also Austin Eckler depending, right? Because the running game has certainly suffered it since Austin's been out of the lineup. So if they do have Austin Eckler in there, I think we'll see more of a balanced approach. If he's not, then air it out. Josh Palmer start with no issues.
Next game up here, New England Patriots at Dallas Cowboys. Cowboys are rightfully 6.5-point favorites. Look, we know what the deal is with Dallas, right? It's Pollard, it's CD. But we started to see a lot of good out of Gallup. I think he looked great against the Cardinals last week. We've got some decent moments here out of the tight ends. I think this is a pretty big bounce back week for Dallas against the Patriots team that, I know there's all this they're worried about Zeke giving him the signals and they picked up, what's his name? Will Greer to be on the Patriots active roster. All this weird stuff is kind of going into it, but
it's too much galaxy brain in, man. It's not that
little too much.
It's not that deep.
I don't know. This one's tough to find a ton of great plays that aren't the obvious guys in this one to me.
Yeah, I wouldn't feel confident starting Brandon Cooks. He should be on your bench. He's on that fringe of should I drop you or not. I wouldn't yet, but I think if he's going to get right, this is probably a good spot to do it. I don't know that I feel comfortable starting Michael Gallup, even though he's coming off of a good game. Kendrick Bourne, you could probably start in deeper leagues, but I think I'd probably prioritize him over the Dallas side of the ball outside of, CeeDee Lamb. Ramondre Stevenson, slightly, I don't know that I'm sweating because he's always going to get the passing down work, but they got Zeke a lot more involved last week. And I don't know, that definitely downgrades Stevenson a little bit going into this matchup because I do think that, the Patriots are going to use Zeke a little bit more. I just don't know who you start over Stevenson, right? This is I don't know. I'd probably downgrade him to more of a flex, but you're going to have to start him in most leagues. So Jake Ferguson, definitely would start him. Hunter Henry, same thing, because there's that dead zone of tight ends where it's hey, you guys are probably have a similar opportunity to get the amount of points of a Dallas Goedert, Pat Freiermuth, et cetera. No guarantees, but at least, Ferguson's running the routes. Hunter's getting the touchdowns and running the routes. So I'd feel good about those tight ends in this spot too.
Yeah. The Stevenson panic feels like one of those classic fantasy things where it's what do I do with Ramondre Stevenson? I'm dude, I mean, there ain't going to be a lot of guys you're going to be trying to start after him. Okay.
No.
So yeah, it feels like one of those classic situations. All right. Next game up here, Sunday Night Football. Oh God.
Yes. The matchup we've all been waiting for. Is it going to be Trevor Siemian is the real question. I'm ready for Trevor Siemian. Bring it on, man. Zach Wilson, can someone save Garrett Wilson? Oh, man, just feel bad for the guy, man. Had high hopes.
Who are we going to see on screen more, Trevor Siemian or Taylor Swift on Sunday Night Football?
Fair.
Anyways, buried the lead here. Kansas City Chiefs, 9.5-point favorites going into New York to face the Jets. It shouldn't be like this. It shouldn't be like this, right? But it is, right? We're back at the Zach Wilson experience. Rich Cimini from ESPN reports the locker room is pissed about Robert Saleh, back in Zach Wilson. It's dude, poor Robert Saleh, man. Just he slipped through a time warp. He's right back in 2022. This is literally all the same stuff that happened last year. And this game is really tough too because again, obviously, Kelsey, Mahomes, those guys are every week plays. I think Pacheco is slowly but surely easing his way into must-start territory just because he's getting so much of that work. But then it's tough to find fringy guys here because I'm not really trying to play Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall as long as Zach Wilson is the damn starter for the Jets. And then even the fringy guys on the Chiefs like Sky Moore or Rashee Rice, they're tough to play against a really good Jets defense. This game just overall is very difficult to read.
Yeah, I'm staying away from the Chiefs wide receivers. It's just they just alternate, right? Pat Mahomes spreads the ball and then he targets Travis Kelce when healthy. So Travis Kelce, obviously, you're not benching him. Pacheco, I agree. I think his role is definitely expanding. A little bit concerned. It kind of sucks that the running back room is just so versatile that they can deploy Jerick McKinnon. They can deploy Clyde Edwards-Helaire in certain situations. So you would love to see more volume in those spots for Pacheco, but he's getting most of the running back work. So outside of the receptions, but I feel good about starting Pacheco. Yeah, I'm not starting any Jets. I can't do it. I have 2 shares of Garrett Wilson, and it just sucks to just have that sitting on the bench there, man. But until we get more sustainable, consistent quarterback play, you can't trust these Jets, man. And Dalvin Cook, sorry, man, he doesn't He doesn't look like the guy that was playing last year.
So,
So yeah, there's just not much upside to look at anything on this Jets front.
all right, well, that brings us to the skip category. And like I said, this is a weird week because Stream is beefy. Even skip, like none of these games to me really screamed skip, right? Because I would love to skip the Jets, but the Chiefs are on the other side. I would love to skip the Patriots, but the Cowboys are on the other side. You know, I'm a sicko who finds the damn Steelers Texans interesting, you know? So with skip, there's only 2 games here, starting with even this one. I feel weird putting in skip. Tampa Bay Buccaneers at New Orleans Saints. It sounds like we'll probably get Jameis Winston in a revenge game against his old team, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers there. So what does that do for guys like Chris Olave? We're obviously getting Alvin Kamara in his debut for the 2023 season. How do we feel about the Saints with Jameis Winston at the helm?
Yeah, this one I probably would put this into the stream category over the Kansas City Chiefs and the Jets, because I think, as you mentioned before, I think the Taylor Swift Kelsey thing is going to be insufferable on that telecast. So just to avoid that,
you can't skip it. It's a standalone game. You can't skip it.
Yeah, I might be. I don't know, I'll figure out something else.
Early bedtime.
Yeah, there you go. But divisional matchup, Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Saints. I'm for it, man. I'm going to watch this game. A lot of star potential in it. Olave, I love that Alvin Kamara is coming back. And Jameis Winston has actually been more conservative as a member of the Saints. So hopefully he can try to air it out. He's got the weapons now with Mike Thomas, like that he didn't have, previously when he had this starting gig. So I think I'm actually a little bit more excited about Jameis in this spot. Tampa Bay couldn't do anything against the Eagles last week. Mike Evans had the ridiculous catch, probably with the catch of the year. It's crazy what he's doing. But outside of that, man, I think I would feel confident starting Rachaad White, Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, and on the other side of the ball, Olave, not benching him, not benching Kamara. You got to start Kamara. You got him in like an 8th, 9th round value. He's going to have most of the running back room to himself. Tony Jones and Condre Miller just kind of splitting time there. But I think it's really going to be Kamara is going to be the one that you're going to want to start in this one.
Yeah, he's got a pretty good opportunity to run away with this job. I like him in this one. Yeah, Rachaad White. I mean, we need a real game from Rachaad White that's not against the Bears. Okay, that's what we need to see out of Rachaad White. Speaking of the Bears, that brings us to our final game here, and the game that clearly belonged in the skip category: the Denver Broncos at Chicago Bears. Yeah. The Bears have been terrible. The Broncos are coming off getting beat by, they let up 70 points. Okay, they got beat by 50 freaking points over there. So miserable week for both of these teams. But is there opportunity? 2 bad offenses, 2 bad defenses. What do we do here, Dan?
I mean, this is the test for Justin Fields. If he doesn't do something against this team that let up 300 some rushing yards last week, like he's got to utilize that. So this is on the Bears scheme, man. Can they make the right adjustments? I actually I noticed we were trying to look at the names of like who to actually start here. I think Khalil Herbert, this is probably another one of his good opportunities. Like probably doesn't get any better. Hopefully he actually gets more than 7 carries in this one if the Bears are smart. DJ Moore, it's volatile, but I mean, you got to put him I think you can put him in the flex, but if you're starting 3 wide receivers, like I think you can't bench him. Javonte Williams, I think this is a good get right spot for him, but he's still also dealing with a committee and not really playing that much in the red zone there because they haven't really gotten in the red zone that much. But one guy we talked about last week, and you weren't sold because he wasn't getting a lot of opportunities, but Marvin Mims. I think that he's actually starting, his role is going to continue to expand. And it's clear every time he touches the ball, something good happens. So come on, Sean Payton, wake up. Give the man the opportunities. Get him more snap shares. Get him more opportunities to push the ball downfield. He's an explosive play guy, man. And he can do it in all facets of the game, whether it's in the return game or as a receiver. So kind of like a Shaheed kind of guy. So, yeah, I would actually feel comfortable putting in Marvin Mims if you have like multiple, 3 wide receiver type leagues.
Most explosive player on that offense. It's not saying much, but like most explosive player on that offense by a lot at this point. So yeah, Sean Payton, come on. You didn't come back to get beat by 50 points and to not play the guy that you traded up for, your first draft pick in the Broncos era. Like, and the only thing Russ really does well, once he gets off the scripted plays, he can still run the scripted plays from Peyton are still good. But once you get Russ off the script, it's usually not good unless he's pushing the ball downfield. And the best downfield receiver on this roster, again, not saying much, it is Marvin Mims. So I'm with you. We need to see more of Marvin Mims so far. And yeah, I mean, DJ Moore, man, it just makes me so nervous. It's volatile. There's been not a lot of volume. And I think a good player like Pat Surtain, who coming off getting worked last week, just worked. I mean, get cooked by Chosen Anderson. Come on, dog. I think I think that we will see a big bounce back from Pat Surtain in this one. So this game is funny because both of these offenses are, I mean, not so much Denver. They haven't been nearly as inept as Chicago. They've just been kind of mid. Like I could see this game being high scoring, but I could also see this game being 17-10, even though these defenses are bad. So it's a really tough one to read. But you mentioned Khalil Herbert. That's actually a great transition to our final thing here, our last piece of advice for Yahoo Fantasy lineups before we go. All right, it's week 4, and we're going to help you make some smart decisions on who to start in your flex spot this weekend, courtesy of NerdWallet. NerdWallet helps people make smart choices every day with their side-by-side comparisons of top financial products. Titus, let's do a side-by-side comparison of our own and chat about a few smart flex options that fantasy managers might be choosing between this Sunday. You give me 2, I'll give you 2, and we'll get out of here.
All right. So my guy first up is Tutu Atwell. Love the matchup. He's been playing 92% of the snaps. He's had 8 targets in each of the last 3 games, at least 8 targets in each of the last 3 games. And he scored a touchdown in 2 out of the 3 with 50 yards per game, man. I think this is a guy that has to be in your lineups. He's proven that he can be a wide receiver too. He's thriving. Haven't seen very positive reports on Cooper Kupp, so this actually might be a guy that might have some staying power throughout the course of the season, along with Puka Nacua.
Really like the Tutu Atwell call there. I think he can have a good spot in this matchup. Did you say Khalil Herbert too?
Oh, and Khalil Herbert. That's right. Oh my God. How can I ever recommend someone for the Bears at this stage? But
yeah, come on, man. Say it. I mean, you mentioned somebody from the Bears offense. Say it with your chest, pal.
Hey, man, I'm following the tea leaves here, and the Denver Broncos just let up 300 something yards on the ground. If the Bears can do anything right, they'll know to at least hand the ball off or attempt to run frequently on this Denver Broncos team. He's still averaging 4 yards per carry despite seeing very low volume, but I think we'll see this uptick because this is the vulnerability for the Denver Broncos. This is going to be the Khalil Herbert spot, so I'm going to start him as an RB2, and then we'll live with the results. But here we are.
Yeah, we'll see if Roschon Johnson gets into the mix too, but that's another. I think at this point, it's still Khalil Herbert's backfield. We'll see how long that can hold. We'll also see how long Adam Thielen can hold up. You mentioned him earlier. He's one of my 2 flex players to consider here. You mentioned it, buddy. The volume so far for Adam Thielen has been quietly terrific. He did not have a week 1 performance, but remember, he was coming off a pretty serious ankle injury from the preseason. I think that clearly trended into week 1, but the last 2 weeks has been really good. 32% of the team yards so far for Adam Thielen. Like, he's been the one thing that's kind of working in this passing offense. It's a good matchup against his former team in Minnesota, who really can't do anything right. I mean, they were giving up just wide open windows. I know they blitzed the crap out of Justin Herbert, but so much soft coverage there. I think that's still pretty favorable for Adam Thielen, who he's not going to be the same separator he once was. He's not nearly as explosive as he once was, but he can find those soft spots in zone defenses. I like that one there. And obviously, Tank Dell, he's been on a heater. You can keep on trusting him. I like Nico Collins to bounce back in this one. We talked about the matchup earlier. So far this year, the Steelers, great defense, but they have been stung by outside receivers. Brandon Ayuk got them for 129 yards and 2 scores in week 1. Amari Cooper reached 90 yards on 7 catches in week 2. And Devontae Adams absolutely erupted for 172 yards and 2 touchdowns in week 3. And his running mate, Jacoby Myers, who's an outside receiver, added 85 yards as well. So I think Tank Dell is in the flex consideration this week. You can keep on trusting him after 2 big weeks, even if this defensive matchup is scary on paper. All right, those are our smart flex decisions for week 4. And when you need to make a financial decision, make it a smart one with NerdWallet. Titus, we've done it. We really built all the way up to Bears Broncos and closed out what is, I think, going to be a very, very weird week 4.
Very weird. We got the London game, so football's going to start earlier this week. The scheduling wasn't the best, but you know what? We're going to make it great. There's going to be a lot of fantasy points scored. Let's have a week 4. Let's bounce back and have a great week. I'm with it.
A lot of revenge games, a lot of weirdness. That can lead to a lot of fantasy points. So try to lean into the weirdness and benefit all of you out there. Again, shout out to Titus for doing this. We will probably not see him for a while as the NBA is going to take him away, but I promise ASAP we'll get Titus back on the show. That is going to do it for us today. Be sure to tune in first thing Monday morning to hear Scott Pianowski and I break down all of the things you need to know coming out of Week 4's Sunday slate. Until then, we're out.